It's a real pleasure to welcome all of you to Queen's tonight, to another of our major events in this series, and a particular pleasure for me to introduce and welcome our distinguished speaker, Michelle O'Neill, Sinn Féin Vice President and the party's leader in the North. MLA for Mid-Ulster since 2007. In the Northern Ireland Executive, Michelle O'Neill was Minister for Agriculture and Rural Development between 2011 and 2016, and Minister for Health between 2016 and 17. Michelle joined Sinn Féin after the Good Friday Agreement of 1998. In 2010, she became Mayor of Dungannon and South Tyrone, the first woman ever to hold that position. Michelle, it's great to have you with us at Queen's tonight. Looking forward very much to your talk. And so, to speak to us tonight on the subject, what does the future hold for the North? What does the future hold for the North? Please give a very warm welcome to Michelle O'Neill.
Well, good evening, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening and have a chance to address you. I want to thank the Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Richard English, and Ryan Feeney for inviting me along to give me this opportunity this evening. I want to firstly, before I get into the body of my remarks, I want to acknowledge the vital role that Queen's University plays in its contribution to society here in terms of research and education, but also the regional economy. It's a world-class university, one of the foremost higher educational establishments on these islands, and it's ranked in the top 200 universities in the world. So we're therefore very proud that Queen's is one of our key selling points when we're working to attract foreign direct investors to locate here, and the fact that the university is responsive to businesses creating graduates with the skills, competency and acumen in business relevant areas. So I want to take the opportunity tonight to talk to you about the future. We live in peaceful, yet very turbulent times politically. So what are the present realities and challenges we face, and what does the future hold for the North? In April, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, and this, despite all of our ongoing challenges, gave us the time to stop and to reflect on what has been achieved over the past 2 decades. And the entire island of Ireland has been transformed as a result of the peace process, where we've emerged from decades of political conflict and towards a more prosperous, peaceful and democratic society, of which the Good Friday Agreement of 1998 is the very foundation stone. The agreement was reached after the IRS cessation of 1994, which resulted in multi-party negotiations, forming the basis of a political agreement between the Irish and British governments and between the parties. The agreement received overwhelming endorsement in referenda that was held north and south. The agreement provided an end to conflict and provided a peaceful and democratic alternative and a huge opportunity for us all to design a better society for ourselves and for future generations to live. The declaration by the parties at the start of the agreement says, "We are committed to partnership, equality and mutual respect as the basis of relationships within Northern Ireland, between North and South, and between these islands." When I reflect back to that time as a 21-year-old living in County Tyrone, where we had endured a long conflict, grown up under British military occupation, witnessed firsthand the heartache of family and friends and neighbours being killed, I recall the year of 1998 being one that had optimism and was a time filled with hope. This was what motivated me to become active in politics and public life, and a desire to help build and shape the new future and the opportunities that were before us. Having served in the Assembly alongside unionists and those of a different cultural, religious and political tradition as myself, I inevitably formed friendships with people on a human level and political partnerships whilst working together to improve and deliver public services and a better quality of life for the people that we collectively represented. That partnership and that friendship was no more epitomised in the relationship between the late Ian Paisley and the late Martin McGuinness, while serving together in 2007 as First and Deputy First Ministers. After a turbulent number of years, from 1998 to 2007, of the Assembly being up and down, this period from 2007 once again gave a renewed sense of hope. There was a sense that these once arch opponents had come together and led us over the threshold into a new era. And we're making good on promises given in working with each other in good faith. As the new Vice President of Sinn Féin, I want us to keep that faith. I want us to keep faith with the hope, drive change and get us back to rebuilding partnership and friendship in a working assembly and an executive which allows us to open the door and let the future in. I truly and passionately believe that we need to get back to the letter and to the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement. It was and remains a precious gift of peace to our young people, and it is absolutely indispensable. But I also recognise that peace alone is no longer good enough for this new generation, who rightly demand to be afforded civil, social, economic and cultural rights in the year 2018, which are taken for granted and routine elsewhere on these islands, but are unjustly denied here. Much has changed and been achieved since the Civil Rights Campaign of 1998, but to think that any minority group, or any group at all in 2018 still has to fight for basic rights, including women, LGBT, Irish speakers, ethnic minorities, is simply not sustainable. It is unjust in this modern era. I won't rehearse the past 21 months of political breakdown and deadlock, deal or no deal, because I want to focus tonight on resolutions rather than recrimination. But while we're accustomed to crisis, to disappointments and setbacks in this part of the world, it is imperative that we arrest the political drift that we are currently in, and that we stop the attempts to unravel the Good Friday Agreement and its political institutions before it becomes unsalvageable. Clearly that is a monumental challenge, otherwise it will be done already. There is no way of escaping the two present realities and challenges which are undermining any attempt to restore the executive at this time. The first is the unwanted Brexit. This has been imposed against the wishes and the best interests of the people here. The second is the DUP and Tory confidence and supply arrangement at Westminster, where Theresa May's government is wholly reliant on the DUP to stay in power, and therefore prioritising this self-serving agenda over the peace and the political processes here. And both of these realities are putting at risk our hard-won peace. This deal with the DUP robbed Theresa May and her government of any pretence whatsoever of impartiality in the negotiations for the restoration of the North's political institutions. The idea that her government could act as an honest broker whilst being beholden to the DUP stretches credibility to beyond breaking point. Karen Bradley, as British Secretary of State, disgracefully moved to suspend her powers to call for a future Assembly election because the courts were likely to go on to force her to do so. And she disguised this by, in tandem, cutting MLA pay, something which we said she should do a long time ago. So why has she done this? Because the DUP didn't want to face a court-ordered election while the RHI inquiry is running, as they're exposed for incompetence, dysfunctionality and allegations of financial malpractice by the day. At this time, it is my absolute firm assessment that Karen Bradley has no plan to do anything to constructively aid the restoration of the Assembly. The Sinn Féin leadership met with Theresa May and Karen Bradley on Monday of this week, and we told them in plain terms that this is exactly the case. It is therefore the duty and the responsibility of the Irish Government, who are co-guarantors of the agreement and the peace process, to hold the British Government to their responsibilities. And through the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference, which will meet in a number of weeks in Dublin, insist that together they arrest this situation of stasis and agree to remove the obstacles to restoring the executive. This can be done, this should be done, and this must be done without delay. This in itself could pave the way for a new executive. What nationalism expects to see is that the equality, the mutual respect and all-Ireland approaches enshrined in the Good Friday Agreement are fully embraced by the DUP. That the negative attitude and disrespect to Irish national identity and culture is consigned to the past. That those who wish to live their lives through the medium of Irish language can do so and have protection before the law. The prejudice that's felt by women, the LGBT community and ethnic minorities not only stops, but is prevented by government rather than facilitated. The public deserve to have a functioning government and one in which they can have confidence in. I I would find it hard, I would imagine, to find anyone inside or outside of this room who does not believe that reform of how the Assembly and the Executive and our public body politic operates is a necessity and not a choice. Every government, no matter where you go, wrestles with difficult and complex challenges, and we are no different. But the basic norms of power sharing, party of esteem, and principles of the Good Friday Agreement must be accepted and embraced by everyone in order for us to succeed. So what does that mean? This means discharging our duties in good faith. It means serving all the people equally. It means preventing discrimination, promoting the interests of the whole community, upholding our commitment to genuine power sharing, respect and mutual trust towards one another. It means actively promoting reconciliation and building bridges we can all cross to end sectarianism and bigotry at every level of society. I certainly want an Assembly that operates differently from what went before, and to usher in a new kind of politics, which is progressive, respectful and has integrity. Public confidence must be earned and trust must be rebuilt if the Assembly and the Executive is going to have any kind of credibility. Any new executive should, in my view, be an inclusive partnership coalition government. Never ever again can we see the scandals like Red Sky, NAMA and RHA happen in this place. This is totally unacceptable and unethical behaviour. We need civil service reforms and proper checks and balances too. What the civil services role has been in contributing to the RHA debacle, nobody doubts that it has a critical role in ensuring that there is never a repeat, and therefore we must look at serious reforms. We need ministers who are competent to do their jobs. We need legislative reform to ensure that special advisors operate in an accountable and lawful fashion if we are to uphold the highest standards in public office. We need open government, where decisions on how they are taken and on whose interests are laid bare and properly scrutinised day and daily with no hiding place for any risk of malpractice or cronyism. So can this be done? Yes, of course it can. We all need to know that if we're going to re-enter talks, that those participating have the will to reach agreement, have the mandate and the authority to actually take decisions, and know what it is that they're looking for, because each party brings their own issues, and every party has issues which they want to see resolved. Progress is and always has been possible. If there is a political will, then there is surely always a way. Brexit was not our choice, and it is unwanted by the majority of people and the majority of parties here in the North. There is no good to come from Brexit, for Ireland, North or for South. Throughout all of our peace process, the European Union has been a critical partner for peace, providing substantial political and financial aid, which has led to a greater economic and social progress on an all-island basis. The Brexit crisis is deepening. It is unprecedented, it's chaotic, and how it will pan out is unpredictable to everyone at this stage. As the Brexit negotiations enter the final critical phase, outstanding issues remain to be resolved, not least the question of the Irish backstop and the nature of future relationships between Britain and the European Union. If a deal is reached, there remain a number of challenges to overcome, including obtaining the consent of the Westminster Parliament for any deal. So these issues raise profound questions, not only for the North of Ireland and the EU, but also for the future of the Union itself. The majority of MLAs elected are anti-Brexit, and we are collectively mandated to defend the North's interest. The DUP, in terms of Brexit, are isolationists and on the wrong side of the argument and the democratic will of the people here who voted to remain. They support Brexit at any cost, of imposing a hard border, or, as Nelson McCausland said, Brexit at any cost. Arlene Foster insists that the DUP will not accept a deal that introduces new regulatory difference between the North and Britain, and that this is a red line, that this red line is a blood red line for the DUP. We have to avoid economic apartheid on this island and a hard border. Michel Barnier, the chief negotiator, has said the checks are unavoidable if the erection of a physical border is to be prevented, and that the EU wishes to make them not too burdensome, in particular for smaller businesses. He says that their proposals limit itself to what is absolutely necessary to avoid that hard border. customs procedures and the respect for EU standards for products. It does not include measures on free movement of EU citizens, services, healthcare or social and environmental policy, but it gives the North of Ireland benefits that no other third country enjoys, including access to the EU single market for goods and continued benefit from EU free trade arrangements and the continuation of the single electricity market. The proposed backstop is a safety net and it's an insurance policy. The common travel area, in the event of a Brexit deal or none, will continue to allow British and Irish citizens only in Britain and on the island of Ireland associated rights and entitlements, including access to employment, healthcare, education, social benefits, as well as the right to vote in certain elections. Brexit cannot be considered to be an orange and green issue, and I think there's considerable merit in us all looking at post-Brexit rights and entitlements through a new lens. There is obvious value in a Bill of Rights for the North that's been referred to, or that was referred to in the Good Friday Agreement, in its ability to mitigate the potential rights impacts of Brexit. There is also value in a Charter of Rights for the whole of the island, as referred to in the Good Friday Agreement. This would also support the provision in the agreement on equivalence of rights on the island. We, along with the SDLP, the Alliance and the Greens, want the North to remain within the Customs Union and the single market. We want to preserve the Good Friday Agreement in all of its parts, protect human rights, and together make clear that the backstop is the bottom line to protect our future economic stability. Together, we met EU Chief Negotiator Michel Barnier as the majority voice for the people here, and he assured us that the backstop would apply unless and until another solution is found. Chequers fails to offer another solution, and Michel Barnier has been crystal clear on that. We as a party are arguing for the North to receive special economic status within the EU. A special status relationship outside of the EU would do little to deal with the massive political, social and economic challenges thrown up by Brexit. As a former Agriculture Minister, I'm acutely aware of the critical importance of the agri-food sector to our economy, and it's uniquely vulnerable to the loss of EU funding and the potential tariff and non-tariff barriers for trade. For example, almost 30% of the North's milk is processed in the south, which also receives 40% of our live lamb exports. So we all know that Brexit poses major challenges to agriculture, but also to the manufacturing, to the retail sector, hospitality, higher education, tourism, energy. All sectors will be negatively impacted. We also know that the fluctuating euro-sterling exchange rate will be compounded if there are additional trade tariff costs imposed on businesses which some firms could find it impossible to keep trading. Impacts on trade and employment and the need for competitiveness and innovation are all amplified. When trying to attract investors, we talk about our strategic location to British and European markets. We talk about our skilled workforce. We talk about our competitive operating costs, our advanced infrastructure, and these things are now all at risk because of Brexit. The EU helps fund much of what we take for granted. To retain our economic competitiveness, we cannot incur additional trade costs, and we need to retain access to labour and skills. I firmly believe that we need to develop and nurture and build and grow the all-island economy, where we can develop closer regimes and models of integration. In light of Brexit, it's imperative that the island of Ireland redoubles our efforts to develop and rebuild a modern, competitive and sustainable economy, where we open up doors to trade, investment, tourism and jobs, but also develop and invest in our indigenous industries. We need to improve the competitiveness through investing in public services and in infrastructure. And the EU support clearly helps us to do these things and brings massive economic and social benefits. These programmes are important, all the EU programmes are important drivers of regional development in a cross-border context, and they allow for practical support of the peace process and advancement of the Good Friday Agreement. One of the most obvious symbols of the peace process, the invisible border on the island of Ireland, and that is essential. Prior to the Good Friday Agreement, security checkpoints on the border, military installations, which have been built and reinforced from the 70s onwards, were symbols of division and conflict. The demilitarisation of physical border crossings and checkpoints is both a symbol of and a dividend of the success of the peace process. People's daily lives in the border regions have been transformed, And any reversal will have huge adverse economic, social and political and security, but also psychological impacts on people, both in border communities and on the island of Ireland as a whole. Brexit represents the greatest economic threat to the island of Ireland in a generation. I fully respect the right of the British people to leave the EU, and I wish them the very best. However, I am absolutely opposed to the British government dragging us out of the EU against our will. Sinn Féin have influenced and made our case to the EU27, in the Dáil and in the European Parliament. We will continue to make our voices heard and to build a progressive coalition around our national interests in the coming weeks ahead. With all of this going on, there's a growing sense that circumstances are rapidly changing, which will inevitably lead to the final breakup of the constitutional structures of the United Kingdom, which Theresa May and the DUP say they are committed to preserving. The Sinn Féin leadership met with the British Prime Minister and the British Secretary of State in London on Monday. We have made it clear that in the case of a Brexit crash-out and in the case of a no-deal scenario, that it's absolutely incumbent upon them to put the constitutional future to the people here through a Unity Referendum that was promised in the Good Friday Agreement. Their planned imposition of Brexit in Ireland once again demonstrates the failure of partition and exposes further the gaping demographic deficit inherent in a partitioned Ireland. People from across this society, and I believe even those with a British identity, are questioning what will be the merits and benefits of staying within the Union after Brexit. The EU has said that in the event of reunification, the whole of Ireland will be automatically subsumed back into the EU. So the debate about our constitutional future is underway. It's as much about our relationship with Europe as it is about our future Ireland. The Good Friday Agreement provides a peaceful and democratic pathway to Irish unity. And the issue of Irish unity has taken on that whole new dynamic because of Brexit. Demographics are changing, and so too is that political landscape. And this cannot be ignored. Peter Robinson's remarks here at Queen's University when he gave his own lecture back in June acknowledged this. The Good Friday Agreement gives people the opportunity and the choice to decide our future together. How we live together, how we work together, and how we share this island together. The political momentum on change is moving in that direction. Sinn Féin wants a new Ireland, a fairer Ireland, and a united Ireland, but we certainly don't claim to own the debate. I have absolutely no doubt that there are many people within the unionist community who look to Brexit with the same fear and the same trepidation as those from a nationalist and Republican background. The Unity Referendum is coming, and we need to be prepared for it. There's a duty on all of us to be prepared for it, and all options must be on the table as we shape the future together. There is no contradiction whatsoever in delivering on our firm commitment to power sharing with unionism and a functional assembly, whilst also initiating a mature and inclusive debate about a new political arrangements which serve us better. Similarly, there is no contradiction in unionism working the existing constitutional arrangements while taking its rightful place in the conversation about what a new Ireland could look like. It's time for us to hear all voices within this debate. So we must continue our journey of dialogue, of listening, of sharing ideas, because the new Ireland which we seek, that we speak of, there can only be victory for all of us. I want to thank you for taking the time to come here this evening and for listening to what I have to say, but I want to finish by saying this. The debate on our constitutional future threatens no one. So therefore let's have it in a mature and in a rational manner. What has brought us together as a community, divided by identity and allegiance, has been the Good Friday Agreement. So let's defend it and not allow others to rip it or us apart, and recognise that it is indispensable. Let's try and reinvent the optimism and the hope that we have all witnessed before by turning a corner, creating a new kind of politics which is democratic, energetic and progressive, which allows everyone, irrespective of race, of identity, of colour, of creed, of disability, gender or sexual orientation to feel that they belong. Let's get down to business and design a better society and an economy for ourselves and future generations to live in. A shared history does not mean a shared memory or even a shared experience of the past. But we can determine and we can create a shared future together. We can open doors and we can let the future in. We must give people hope and we must create opportunity for young people. This is the most defining period since the 1998 Good Friday Agreement. Change is happening. Dialogue is crucial. We need courage, not chaos. But most of all, we must choose hope over fear. Gura míle maith. Thank you.
Michelle, thank you very much indeed for that thought-provoking lecture. Michelle has kindly said she's going to take questions from the audience. What I'm proposing to do is take a group of questions, 3 at a time, and then give Michelle O'Neill a chance to answer them. I think we have microphones which will come round. So who will start out? This question there over towards the back at the left there, please. We'll start with that. Thank you. Yep, thank you.
You mentioned about the DUP and the Conservative supply and demand deal. And if my reading's correct, there might be a snap election in the south. It might come, and there might be an opportunity for Sinn Féin to go into coalition government. Would that in turn mean that you can't be co-guarantors of the 1998 agreement with an assembly vis-a-vis the DUP? And if you do get that coalition government, how would you use that to inform a constitutional change of Northern Ireland debate?
Thank you. First question, and there's a next question.
Hi, thanks for speaking today. So my question is, given the current political climate, do you think that it was necessary to demand an Irish Language Act, given the fact that there's no impediments for people who wish to speak the language, and in fact, many schools across the north promote it across their curriculum? So my question for you today is, would you reconsider this being a prerequisite to restoring power sharing in the executive?
Thank you very much. Is there a third question at this stage to take before? Yes, there's one there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michelle, you filled the room this evening with young people on the guarantee you're going to tell us about the future, who else holds for the North, but you haven't told us anything. We're about to have a big fight about whether we should or shouldn't have a United Ireland, so I didn't get any kind of inspiration from what you were saying, which I think is unfortunate for the young people who are here, who we want to have their future in Northern Ireland. But as a question, if you have a special arrangement for Northern Ireland that only exists, allows us the opportunity to trade in both the EU and in Britain, but only exists because of our constitutional position, if there were a United Ireland, surely that whole economic development or economic opportunity would disappear, and therefore by arguing that we should have that special arrangement, you're actually arguing against your own reason for being.
Thank you. Michelle, do you want to address those 3 questions? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for the questions. And so the Sinn Féin plan is to be in government north and south. That's our ambition. That's what we work for every day. We make no secret of the fact that we're United Irelanders, so it's not a secret that I would articulate that view. I think that one of the biggest challenges that we've seen over the course of the last year is that the political impasse that's going on for 21, 22 months, down through all the years of negotiations and talks. Unionism, political unionism, I don't mean the ordinary, a unionist person, but political unionism has only ever moved whenever they've been forced to do so. And that pressure has always come to bear from the British government, who, when the Good Friday Agreement was signed back then with a different government, I think that they have lost all impetus to actually try and push unionism in any way. So the deal itself is damaging in terms of the politic here. The DUP themselves never signed up to the Good Friday Agreement. The Conservative government, over the course of the last, since they came into power, over 10 years, have turned their back on the Good Friday Agreement because the peace process itself was not an event in time that we just achieved and that's it all done, sure, everything's fine. It was actually a process that needed to be nurtured. And the British government haven't nurtured it. So I think that the deal between the DUP and the Tories is toxic and has poisoned the efforts here to try and have a restoration of government. I think that if we were ever able to, well, obviously we'll have to go to the electorate whenever we do face an election in the south, and the people will say, will return who they wish to return. Then it'll be for us to negotiate a programme for government and whether or not we think that is fit for us to enter into a government. But we believe in the principle of consent, and we will honour that principle of consent. We will honour the Good Friday Agreement. You'll never find one area or one grey area where we have ever stepped away from agreement that has been made by our party, and particularly in relation to the peace agreement because it's too important. So we would use any relationship that we would ever have in a new government, in an Irish government situation, for the betterment of society. But I think that we're in the space now because of Brexit, and the gentleman here asked the last question about, you know, we're going to have big fights, and we're going to, I think we should fight. I think we should fight hard against Brexit. I think we should fight hard for the Good Friday Agreement, and I think we should fight hard for proper, genuine partnership working, where all the parties work together. So that is politics. That is what we want to try and bring about. So I'm disappointed you didn't hear any hope, because I tried to set out what needs to change. There are fundamental things that need to change, but there's some things that are consistent. The Good Friday Agreement, the principles of power sharing, respect for each other, trust in each other. Those are the principles that we need to get back to if we're going to actually make a success of being able to try and govern together. Because I think we can govern together, but we'll only govern together on the way in which the Good Friday Agreement institutions were first envisaged, which is around those principles which I've talked about. So these are challenging political times, and politics is in flux right across, not just here, right across the world, politics is in flux. But we're certainly in very, very challenging times, and sometimes you have to fight your corner, and I choose to fight for businesses here. I choose to fight for the students that are in this room. I choose to fight for a better society. I choose to fight against sectarianism. I choose to challenge bigotry, and I choose to try and offer some hope that we can do that together. And I don't like that everything in society here, no matter what it is seen through the prism of orange and green. So how do we change that? We change that with political leadership. We change that with a whole society approach. So I said at the start of what I said tonight that there are many challenges and there are many uncertainties, but there are some things that we can do every day, working together to try and bring about a better society for everybody. In terms of the demand for the Irish Language Act, let me just tell you again about what that means. So the Good Friday Agreement talks about how British identity and Irish identity, and how we mutually respect each other, how we live side by side, how we work together and do all those things together. So the DUP, throughout the course of the period of 2007, and for that 10 years, disrespected everything to do with Irish national identity. So that's a departure from the Good Friday Agreement and the principles of how we're supposed to work together. So they continually disrespected the Irish national identity. They continually brought forward petty political decisions around cutting grants, for example, for children to learn Irish. That is not a way to govern. That's not a way to govern for anybody. I wouldn't accept that from anybody. And I think that when you look at the Irish Language Act, it's much more than giving people protection for their rights, protection in law, so they can't be discriminated against, but it's also about the recognition of Irish national identity. So it's twofold for me in that respect. So for me, it's not a red line. It's just about respect for each other. It's about making sure that you recognise that Irish national identity and British national identity need to live side by side here. So it's not for me a red line. It's actually about good governance. It is about parity of esteem, and it is about respect and tolerance.
Thank you very much. Next round of questions. There's one just behind you, Aileen, there. Thank you very much. We'll take 3 questions again. Thank you very much, yeah.
Just coming back to this one about the Conservative DUP Confidence and Supply Agreement. Both the British and Irish governments are co-guarantors of the Good Friday Agreement, and you say that the DUP having an agreement with the Conservatives makes it that the British government is no longer an honest broker. But then there seems to be a disconnect in your thinking when it comes to going into government in the Republic. You said it wouldn't impede the Irish government from being an honest broker because it would be for the betterment of society, Sinn Féin being in government in the Republic. But do you not see that there have actually been positive developments come from the Confidence and Supply Agreement with the £1 billion of extra investment in infrastructure and health and education in Northern Ireland? So I don't really see the distinction between DUP Conservative agreement and the Sinn Féin Irish government agreement in the future.
Thank you. There's a question over there on the left, please. Thank you very much.
Hi, Michelle. I just want to address just a wee comment made by a man over there. I'm a young person and I'm really inspired by your speech tonight. And I think as a young person, Sinn Féin really represents my views, and I do see a future for the North and a good future. But as a young person, I study here at Queen's, and I just want to ask, do you think a United Ireland will benefit young people and students?
Thank you. And then there's a question down here at the front, please, Aileen. Here, just gentleman at the front.
Do you feel that as part of equality and respect for all in Northern Ireland, as you say, bringing that to all peoples and groups, do you feel the extension of the abortion regulation in the United Kingdom as currently is would bring equality and respect for all people in relation to the ability for children with disabilities to be aborted later stage in pregnancy than those without? As a person with disability, it strikes quite hollow to say that extending the ability to kill a child weeks after its peers, regardless of condition, but especially one that's protected. You know, you wouldn't kill a child that happens to be a different race, gender, but why can a child with a disability be killed weeks after its counterparts for something like Down syndrome, when I know Down people and they can live perfectly well, and they are people as equal as we. So when we talk about respect for Irish language and allowing people the freedom to live their lives as they see fit with respect for others, is it right to extend the Abortion Act as is and allow children with disabilities to be aborted at a later stage? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Michelle, there's 3 questions. If you...
Yeah, I think that this gentleman up here talked about the positive developments from the DUP Pact. We're yet to see this magic money. So this money that's being promised, this 1 billion, I don't know where it is because it's not being invested into our health service or into our education or into any of the other promises that were made. So I think that the DUP are probably being held over a barrel over different commitments that were made, and the money will be released at different stages. So I don't see the positive developments from that money. I also wouldn't be bought off. I wouldn't be bought off just in order to support a Tory government to keep them in power and for them to implement their reckless Brexit agenda, which isn't good for us. So the £1 billion, even in itself, if you take Brexit aside, wouldn't even for 1 second replace the money that the Tories have taken out in their austerity policies over the last 10 years. So I wouldn't get any way excited about, you know, that money that's coming out. And I always said from the start, whenever that deal was announced, that we would never be churlish. Our public services are struggling. Our health service is on its knees. Education are struggling. All the public services are struggling. So we would always accept, in terms of any additional funding that helps us to be able to do the things that need to be done in terms of public services. But I would not get excited about the £1 billion, which we haven't seen yet. I think around the whole issue of, you know, United Ireland and what that looks like. And see, I think one of the problems and one of the challenges we have in the whole debate about a New Ireland is that we're not people have been fearful to have the conversation. People have been fearful, you know, to articulate their viewpoint because it's always seen as sectarian. But it's not sectarian, because the New Ireland that we're trying to plan has to be for everybody. It doesn't work. If it's not going to work. I wouldn't even try to propose that we try to create an Ireland that's just for Irish nationalists. It has to be, we have to do it in such a way where we plan it together, where it's actually genuinely about making sure that people with an Irish national identity have respect, and people with a British national identity, and the things that are important to them are also respected. So I think we need to be generous to each other in this period of time, and then I think the world's your oyster. Because I think that if we're serious about taking this on in a new way, I just don't want to add the 6 counties of the north onto the 26. That's not a republic that I want to be part of. So we have fundamental challenges which we need to bring about, and people want a more progressive society. And if you even look at the recent votes around, you know, the repeal, marriage rights in the south, Ireland's changing. It's changing right across the country. And I think that we need to embrace that change. People want progressive politics, and they want their rights delivered. So that's the kind of society, and I think that's one that will benefit any student, and I think that, or any young person, and also gives you ownership of the future. Because young people of today should not be fighting the battles of the past. We have to understand that in terms of the past, there are conflicting narratives. We're never going to agree. That's step 1 in terms of reconciliation. So if you work on that basis that we are never going to agree, we have those different narratives, different lived experiences, and respect each other's viewpoint and accept everybody's understanding or everybody's lived experience, then that allows us to move forward and build the future together and stop fighting those battles of the past. That's how I see it. Sounds very simplistic, but that is exactly how I think that we can do it. And the issue of abortion rights, I don't support the extension of the British law. So just to be very clear, I want to end the criminalisation of women. who need health care. This is a health care issue. For women, this is a health care issue. So in terms of what you've said in terms of would we bring forward laws that would support abortion in terms of someone having the diagnosis of a disability, that is not the Sinn Féin position. That is not the law that we would bring about. We don't support the extension of the 67 Act. We actually recently had this big debate at our party conference, which you probably have followed given that you're passionate about the issue. We're a recent party conference and we set forward a number of things that we want to end the criminalisation of women, that we support abortion whenever, in terms of sexual crime, in terms of fatal fetal abnormality, in terms of limited circumstances. So if we work on that basis, I am never proposing a law which you have suggested. That is the law in England. That is what the 67 Act is. That's not what we support.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Take the next round of questions. One in the middle here, the gentleman with the white shirt on. Thank you.
Hi, Michelle. My question is a legacy question. I work in the legal profession and every week outside the Lagan-side or outside the High Court, I see Sinn Féin representatives who are rightly advocating for members of the nationalist community who are victims, the likes of Ballymurphy and Loughlin Island. And that's great because you're advocating for a rights-based society. What I never ever see is a Sinn Féin representative or anyone from Sinn Féin advocating for victims of the unionist community. I never see them outside courts advocating for their rights. And my question is, if you're advocating for a rights-based society, why is it that only one side of the community are being represented at the courts by Sinn Féin? Because otherwise, it's simply one-sided of the community, and you're not actually representing all of the community. So I'm just asking why Sinn Féin don't do that.
Thank you. There's a question here, gentleman. Thank you, Maurice. Yeah. Thank you very much.
There's been much talk for a long time about power sharing, but recently it seems to be more an abuse of power, and pulling down the executive to me is an abuse of power. And instead of that, what I think we should be talking about is responsibility sharing. Every MLA who stood for election was taking on the responsibility after election to look after the needs of his electorate for 100% of the electorate, not just those who voted for him. So my question would be, if the 250-odd thousand of people who voted for Sinn Féin were given a little questionnaire to prioritise all the points in the manifesto that Sinn Féin had, do you not think the top three would come out as health, education and infrastructure? And the other things, in order to accept the responsibility for that, you should get into government, into the executive, and get on with managing those things and perhaps getting the £1 billion released from the British government. At the same time, you could still carry on pursuing the other points in your manifesto. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll take one more question. There's a question there, Maurice, just behind you, the lady there. Thank you very much. We'll take this one and then ask Michelle to address those questions. Thank you.
So in the wake of the repeal referendum in the south, there was a sense of optimism towards the north. But with the recent Brexit conversations, and I understand, granted, they are an enormous issue, it feels like the abortion issue and other issues are sort of being left by the wayside, perhaps. And sort of the question is, can we ensure that they're still going to be looked at and they're not going to get sort of swept past?
Thank you. Michelle?
I'll take that one even first. You're right. The momentum that came about because of repeal was amazing. And for me, that vote was a vote for women. It was a vote for change. It was a vote for women in the Magdalen laundries. It was a vote for women who had their babies stolen off them in homes. It was a vote to end gender inequality. It was a vote for the pay gap. It was a vote for all of those things, I think, that we need to see change on. So it won't fall by the wayside. We obviously want to see the end of criminalisation of women, and then we want to bring forward our own laws here. Unfortunately, in the absence of an executive, and also because of the position of the DUP, that it would be difficult in terms of getting it through an executive, but that doesn't mean you stop trying. It means that in the interim, we very much push the Irish government, because obviously the Taoiseach and the Health Minister, Simon Harris, have both said that women in the North wouldn't be left behind, and that they find some way to to provide, make the provision to such times as we have the situation here. When I was Health Minister, I had started the work around fetal abnormality and trying to bring forward a report to the Executive because we need to change the law. Our laws are outdated, they're archaic, they are serving women very, very poorly. And if we're going to build a new society, then women have the rightful place in that society. So be assured that we won't take our foot off the pedal on those issues. And actually, Mary Lou, our President, was speaking yesterday in the Dáil on this very issue and raised it with the Health Minister. On the legacy of the past, I'll stand with anybody. I'd stand with anybody that would ask me. I think it's important that we acknowledge all the hurt and pain. I see it as my job as a political leader to try and heal that pain of the past. And the point I made earlier about, young people not fighting the battles of the past. But if we don't sufficiently deal with the past in its entirety, then we're never going to be able to build that new future. It's always going to be a barrier to the future. That's why the legacy mechanisms that have been consulted on are so important. Like they've been 10 years in getting us to that point, and now we have people trying to unravel it before it's even concluded. We need those mechanisms implemented because what one family wants can be very, very different to what another family wants. And the legacy mechanisms were a whole range of measures that allowed people access to different mechanisms to allow them to get the closure which they want. Some people want prosecutions, some people don't. Some people want the truth, but everybody deserves the truth. Absolutely deserves the truth. So I will stand with anybody, any family that's been hurt throughout the conflict. I see that as a fundamental part of my role as a political leader. I want other parties to stand with me on that because I do believe that the past is going to always hinder our future and working together if we don't deal with it sufficiently. So we can't hide the mechanisms that have been consulted on. We need the legislation brought forward and we need to get them up and running to allow people, because families are dying. 50 years after the Ballymurphy families, I can list all the tragedies down through the years, people who have been bereaved. Doesn't matter who you are. One mummy's pain is the same as another's. One sister's loss is the same as another's. So it doesn't matter who you are, you deserve a way to deal with the past. And I think that the way forward is for us to bring forward legislation on the legacy mechanisms and allow us to be able to do that and provide that for people. And then we need to reconcile our society. Like we have such a big job of work to do in order to try and provide that reconciliation. And that involves me stepping outside my comfort zone. And it involves others stepping outside their comfort zone. It involves us. It means that we have to try and build bridges together and we have to try and work together. And it means we have to tackle sectarianism, which is so rife in our society today. So I'll play my part and I will stand with anybody and I will talk to anybody and I will engage with anybody that wants to talk to me about how we try and support people who've been bereaved in the past. On the issue of this gentleman around, you said that the biggest abuse of power was the executive collapsing. The biggest abuse of power was the RHI scandal. And NAMA and RHI, all the scandals that are Red Sky that have all come before it. When Martin McGuinness resigned, he did so with a heavy heart. He didn't do it easy. That man worked the institutions, he led our party in those institutions for 10 very challenging years. But why did he do it? He did it because it's the right thing to do. He did it because he believes in the Good Friday Agreement. He did it because he believed in the principles of power sharing and genuinely respecting each other and working together. Because none of us are going to govern with the other. We need to work together. So when Martin McGuinness resigned, he did the right thing. And at that time, and I encourage you to read his resignation letter again, he asked Arlene Foster to stand aside and to do the right thing and to allow for a time limit inquiry. But she refused to acknowledge the public outcry and the anger that was out there. And you talked about public services. And I agree with you. Public services are under massive threat. They're under massive pressure. And remember why they are under pressure. Not least the need to reform and change how we do things, but they're under pressure because of Tory austerity. They're under pressure because of the cuts down through the years. They're under pressure continually and they need to be reformed, and I want to play my part in that. I want to be in an executive. Sinn Féin wants to be an executive. We want to pick our government departments. We want to bring forward the kind of reforms that we will. But we'll only govern if we govern on the right basis. And that is proper power sharing, respect for each other, equality for all citizens. You can't have a government that discriminates left, right and centre at its whim based on fundamentalist views or anything else. You have to have a government that governs for all citizens and does it collectively. So I agree that the public service is under pressure. I agree that we need to tackle health reforms. I was the minister that brought forward the reform package in terms of health. I want to see it implemented. I have a vested interest in wanting to see that implemented. But if you don't get the core fundamentals of government right, then you're going to have, you can nod your head, but I need to set out my position. But if you, absolutely, yes, I take my responsibility very seriously. My responsibility to all citizens to make sure that we govern together and appropriately and make sure we treat everybody fairly. A government that discriminates against people is not a government, it's not a good government, and it's not a government that people deserve.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more round of questions. There's a gentleman over on the left there, Morris, just behind you. Thank you.
Gurma, Michelle as the Coach Fogly, Intak Ledger was Intak Dohasak, Anact, Gurmila Mayoga as Chak, Dogus Gurmila Mayoga, Fanya the Exasu or some Mock Yarda, Oxer some Yarda, Yardini Yoga, Summer Shaw. So thank you for your comment tonight. Thank you for, you're very hopeful and brave and leadership. Sorry, leaderful, I don't know the right word, but you're strong words tonight, but also thank you for your stance and your party stance in standing up for my rights as a young Irishman and a young Gaelgoer, and thank you for standing up for the rights of many people in this country. But my question is, there's an important election next week. It's an election that I feel that myself as an Irishman in the north should have every right to vote in. And I'm just wondering what you think about whether we should be allowed to vote in the presidential election for the South, and also what you think of Leah's campaign, because it looked to me like Leah Reid's campaign has been very energetic, hopeful and vibrant, and I just think it's a bit of a breath of fresh air. So what do you think about the campaign?
Thank you. And there's a question from the lady here. Thank you.
My name is Anne Graham. My brother Edgar was a member of the previous assembly, and he was murdered just yards from where we are tonight. Jerry Fitt at the time said in the House of Lords his murder will be seen as a direct attack on the people who voted for him and whom he represented in the Northern Ireland Assembly. I'm just an ordinary unionist, I'm not a political unionist, and I'm very grateful to you, Michelle, for coming here tonight and for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. It's been reported that you have refused to condemn my brother's murder. I have no difficulty in condemning the murders of people like Pat Finucane and Rosemary Nelson, who was at Queen's Law Faculty in the same time as I was. There was a fellow, Eamon Collins, who was there at the same time as well, and he was brutally murdered. And I could recite a list of the people in the legal system who were murdered, but I'll spare you that. But I would like to ask you just, what is your moral compass? I hear what you say, that there's a narrative of the past and we won't agree on it. I've had that said to me by other Sinn representatives, where I'm happy to speak to anybody from Sinn Féin or SDLP or anywhere. I didn't grow up a bigot, my brother didn't grow up a bigot. I would like us all to live peacefully on the island of Ireland. And I have no objections to United Ireland, except I have a greater objection now than I probably ever had, simply because I would say it is a victory for the people who murdered my brother. So I want to ask you, my question is really, what is your moral compass? And what can you offer to me, an ordinary unionist? To me, murder is murder. And how can I respect you when you fail to condemn my brother's murder? But thank you for coming here.
Thank you very much indeed. And there's a final question, the gentleman in the green in the middle. Thank you, Aileen. Thanks very much.
Michelle, I just want to thank you very much for coming, and I want to extend a personal thanks to you now. As a gay man, I want to say thank you very much for signing up for my rights within Northern Ireland, and you represent me very well, and I appreciate that. But I live with two girls, and the two of them come from unionist backgrounds, and now the two of them, following Brexit, have had a radical rethink of our politics. And I'm curious as to what you think are the key driving factors in Sinn Féin policy that are finally going to move people who have been brought up in unionist backgrounds into fundamentally believing in United Ireland. Because these two girls are starting to think that way, and I'm curious as to what Sinn Féin is going to do in the future to finally move the agenda and move a political discussion towards unification and convince these people with policies. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Michelle.
Thank you, everyone. I think that on the presidential voting rights, there's going to be a referendum next year. The president is the president of Ireland and represents us all. So I think it's only right that we should have voting rights in terms of that election. So I think it's going to be a very energetic and vibrant campaign, and I would encourage, you know, all young people and everybody to get involved and make sure that it's actually won. I think it's been a brilliant campaign. I think that the presidential campaign itself, you know, the incumbent Michael D. Higgins, who everybody thinks has, you know, done a reasonably good job, and he served his time well throughout the course of the last 7 years. But nobody should be gifted an elected position, you know, indefinitely or for 14 years. I think that's so the establishment itself, if you want to call it that, the big parties in the South decided that, you know, we'll just let Michael D. run and that'll be it. But I think that the people deserve a chance to have their say on the election, and I think Leah is offering a vision for a new Ireland. She's offering a vision for how she would carry out her role in the presidency in the next 7 years. She's also made a commitment that she will, in fact, only do it for one term. So I think it's about, it feeds into the change in Ireland. It feeds into the fact that, you know, north and south, the island's changing. I think it feeds into the fact that, you know, her vibrancy, what she wants to bring to it. In fact, she's a Gaeilgeoir, you know, she just has so many amazing talents what she'll bring to that role. So I think that her campaign itself has been very exciting, but presidential voting rights need to be won for all the citizens on the island of Ireland, and hopefully we'll be able to do that with the referendum next year. Can I say to Anne, I'm sorry that you lost your brother. Can I say that thank you for what you've said in terms of engaging with me tonight, and I'm very happy to talk to you at any stage, at any time. I think that it's so important that we try to deal with the past in such a sensitive way. You accepted that, or you've said that some people have said to you before about different narratives. There are different narratives. And I think that's the first step to actually allowing us to move forward, is actually recognising that we are not going to agree. We're not going to agree on the past. But if you accept that as a premise to move forward, then that in itself is a significant move forward. I can promise you it's not about victories, and I said that when I spoke earlier. It can't be a victory for anybody. A new Ireland can't be built on a victory. A new Ireland has to be built actually on genuine principles that this young fella talked about. You know, what are the policies? How do we design the future together? What is it that makes people, what is going to give people from a unionist background, or with a British identity perhaps is a better way to put it, what is going to give people the British identity, the comfort to know that there will be no discrimination, that they will not be disrespected, that they will be an equal citizen in a new Ireland. So I think we have a big job of work to do in order to try and convince people of what that looks like. But I also would say this, I'm not prescriptive about a new Ireland, and that needs to be so. Because if I said, this is my view of a new Ireland, I can be part of the debate. I can certainly articulate my viewpoint, but I think it's important that we all collectively design it together. What does it look like? You know, all the things that we need to discuss, the emotional arguments that are attached to whether it's Irish national identity or British national identity, you know, the social, the economic, what are those things? That's the type of thing. But I think that we need to be, Anne talked about moral compasses and, you know, what guides me. What guides me is fairness. What guides me is equality. What guides me is genuinely being respectful and listening, being tolerant, making sure that we design a future where everybody feels comfortable, that they belong, that they have a position, that we don't have minorities or majorities, that we actually work together and try to bring about change and make sure that no young person ever has to fight the battles that we have fought in the past.
Thank you very much. Michelle, you can tell with the range and energy of the questions in response to your thought-provoking lecture how much people have appreciated you being with us tonight at Queen's. So thank you for that. A few words of thanks as we bring this to a close. First, thanks to everyone in the audience for taking time to come. I think these events at Queen's are a great opportunity for a particular kind of disagreement as well as agreement, for people to express different views and challenge in the way that's been done tonight. And I think that's of immense value for the society. So thank you on behalf of Queen's for that. Thank you to Ryan Feeney and his public engagement team at Queen's for excellently putting together this. Please do come to future events that we're running and look at the things on the list at the website at Queen's to see what Ryan and the team are putting together. But mainly for the thought-provoking lecture, and with a small gift on behalf of the university, would you please join me in thanking our speaker tonight, Michelle O'Neill.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Megan.